Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and I'm here to review the new Darren Aronofsky film, Mother. Oh my, what a movie. And I know a lot of you probably have seen there's tons of comments and thoughts and reviews out there on what the hell this movie was. And in some ways I do admire this film in how technically it was created, but the messages and the ideas behind it I think are pretty lacking. But we're going to get to that, and we're going to talk about that here on my review. So this was directed by Darren Aronofsky, who has made films like The Wrestler and The Fountain and Black Swan, Requiem for a Dream, Noah, and he has an interesting mixed bag of different kinds of films that he's made in his career. And looking at this one in particular, this is definitely on the far end of the Fountain side, where this is weird and gets really far out there and really thinking about what the hell this movie is. And in terms of how the story was told, it's very clunky and abrupt how this film shifts from scene to scene, and it is a bit abrasive. And in general, this is, and I've heard this described as an assault on all the senses, and sure as hell is. And honestly, it does a really good job of doing that, better for worse. But in terms of, it's really slow for like the first half of the film, and it's an interesting slow burn, but then the second half of this film is unbelievably aggressive and overwhelming. So it's going from like traveling like, hey, I'm going 10 miles an hour here, until I'm blasting at 120 miles an hour, and it's really jarring. And that's the thing about the tone. This film is so weird and all over the place and so jarring and obnoxious at points where it's just like, I don't know how to feel about this film. And it is very impactful with what it's trying to do. It's trying to make you feel uncomfortable and does amazing jobs at doing that, and really putting home to what this unsettlingness that's built up in this film and trying to make that really hammer home. And yeah, it really goes there. And in terms of the cinematography by Matthew Matthew Labatique, and he's done a lot of films for Darren Aronofsky, and maybe someday I'll get his name right, but he uses a lot of handheld cam, and honestly, it is really well utilized, and there's extreme close-ups throughout the whole entire film that really make you feel uncomfortable. And then you also get a sense that there's a couple of shots throughout the film that are just so jarring, I have no idea what's going on. But it is using very powerful framing with those close-ups and making you feel really claustrophobic and uncomfortable with how everything's going. And you really feel like the world's falling and closing in on you, like Jennifer Lawrence's character does feel in this film. Now, Darren Aronofsky wrote this, and it's very ambitious and haunting in terms of the story and where it goes, and it's very interesting and intriguing, but it is flabby at certain points, and it tries to do a lot and doesn't always succeed with everything that it's trying to do. But then you take a look at the characters, and they're pretty stereotypical, but you do get a sense of like a lot of deep-seated emotions that are dealing with these characters, and have some moments where they get to really flesh themselves out. But it's mostly the two main characters, Jennifer Lawrence's character and Javier Bardem's character. And in terms of the dialogue, it is intriguing, but can be heavy-handed and obnoxious at the same time. This movie feels like a giant contradiction, and I'm really trying to balance how I feel about this between being impressed and appreciating its ambition, but also being like, this is a really weird experience. I had a guy get up at the end of the movie and just be like, this was the single most worst experience I've ever had in a theater, and just like storms out, just like, oh geez, wow, that really affected him a lot. But so I was sitting there with my jaw dropped, because there's some scenes in this that hit so hard and are just so disturbing and unsettling and obnoxious, and just goes places and really challenges you as an audience. Now, how I interpreted a lot of the things in terms of like celebrity idolization and relationships and stuff like that. I thought that was a lot more intriguing than Darren Aronofsky's actual explanation of what this is, and it's a really obnoxious allegory about the Bible and stuff like that, and how heavy-handed it is. Feels like a giant hammer is like on top of you. It's like, okay, I get it. I really do. You don't have to keep hitting it so hard. But I do appreciate some of the other things that it alludes to throughout the film that can be taken in different ways. And I appreciate how this film really makes you think. And the composer, Johan Johansson, who is an amazing composer, has done some fantastic things, makes for a very eerie and haunting film in this. And I have to give a shout out to the sound editing in this. This house was alive and it's funny because in the film kind of is, but how the scenes where there's just sequences where all you hear is the creaking of the house and how unsettling and powerful that can be. Now, acting. I thought Jennifer Lawrence and Javier Bardem did fine jobs. Ed Harris and Michelle Pfeiffer really get to dig into this one, and they have a lot of fun. I thought they both had very powerful performances. I honestly think Michelle Pfeiffer could potentially get an Oscar nod for how like the way that she just expressed everything in her face, how everything came out and those emotions were so impactful. And to wrap things up, this was a very uncomfortable and ambitious experience. As somebody who is leaning towards the side of an introvert, this film made me feel so violated and uncomfortable throughout, and it's really awe-inspiring how amazingly uncomfortable you could feel based off of how well this movie was put together technically. And then the flaws with the direction and with the writing. And honestly, I might be giving this a little bit too high of a grade, but was really impressed by the ambition and the technique that went into making this film. This is kind of up there for Ghost Story with me. Ghost Story was a little better for me. I'm going to give Mother a B. Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and I'm here to review American Assassin. And when I first saw these trailers, I'm like, this could be pretty cool. Has Michael Keaton in it. That got me real excited. And I'll fanboy over him in a little bit. But overall, this film, I thought it was fine. And I did think that it could set up a potentially interesting franchise if they choose to keep going with these characters. Because I think the ideas are cool. The story wasn't super interesting, though. The director is Michael Cuesta, and it's very straightforward, but some of the editing's a bit iffy and jumbled and is confusing at points in terms of the story and what's going on. But overall, I think it's very serviceable workman direction, and it is slow towards the beginning of the film and hits a more normal stride towards the end. And it has a very dreading flat tone to it, and that was off-putting for me. It didn't really bring a lot of energy or a lot of like excitement to the film, which was surely lacking throughout this film, minus some scenes with a particular actor. And there was some intensity enough. There's one particular scene that you really feel it, and that goes up to a lot to the actors in the scene, not necessarily maybe the scene itself. And also on a side note, the CGI in this is so bad. You can tell this is a $30 million movie, and that why they went there with the third act to have so much CGI, it wasn't worth it. It just looked really bad. Cinematographer is Enrique Chediak. It's very generic by the numbers kind of cinematography. That's a lot of this movie. It's very generic and by the numbers for the most part. Writers, 5 of them by committee. Woohoo! Because why do you need 5 people to write this script? It was bloated and uninspired story. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of subplots that is like, are they really needed? Are we really focusing on what we should be focusing on? And this young man who wants revenge, becoming this assassin. And there's one really interesting character and one slightly interesting character. Our main character is the slightly interesting one. The really interesting one is the hardened veteran who trains him to be an assassin, and thank you, Michael Keaton. and you'll be hearing a lot of that in this review. The dialogue's, it wasn't, I don't recall it being really bad. It's just very, blah, and not a whole lot of super interesting things to say. And it's not super deep. It does try to deal with some political issues around the world, but overall it's pretty serviceable, straightforward film. The music by Stephen Price is very atmospheric and does build up some of the sequences, and I think it is worked very well in the film. And in terms of the acting, Dylan O'Brien and Taylor Kitsch's villain wasn't super interesting, and Dylan O'Brien's character I thought could use some more, but both of them did a fine job. They really brought the characters to life, and I thought they were very believable in their roles. But Michael Keaton, yes sir, you bring all the energy, and you light up every scene that you're in, and you're just intense, and bring gravitas, and just, you can feel him on screen, and his presence is fantastic, and much, much, much appreciated throughout this film. And he has one scene where him and Taylor Kitsch have a scene, and that scene is fantastic, probably the best one in the whole entire film. My closing thoughts: we have some promising characters that I would appreciate in a different film, but the story here is really generic and kind of wasteful origin story. But I'd be game for other films if they tried to go back and revisit these characters. I'm going to give American Assassin a C.